In studio, we have a special guest. He came by for the recent Thanksgiving meal here at Krista Media. We have someone from the Purposely Equipped podcast series network that we also host here, not just the radio stations, but really doing a lot in the podcasting realm these days. And we have Nathan Sutherland. Hi, Nathan.
Howdy. Thank you for having me today.
Good to have you in studio. You host something called Gospel Tech.
Yes.
And this has been going on for a little while, right?
It's been a couple years now. I run a ministry, Gospel Tech, and it's to help families love God and use tech. This idea that there's a lot of technology out there, so how do we manage it well, and how do we train our kids to use technology from the hope they have in God, not for hope?
Not for hope. Do you find that really, kids are into their screens big time.
They are. And it's not all bad. Some of those screens are helping these kids become all God's made them to be. And sometimes it's not the case. So I love being able to equip and empower parents and grandparents to have those conversations and know when do we need to intervene and when do we need to encourage and celebrate what God is doing.
What's a couple things people should definitely be aware of when it comes to tech and maybe safeguarding their kids?
Yeah. So first is you got to know there's two kinds of tech. You have tool tech that helps you create. This would be like Microsoft Word, AutoCAD, Excel spreadsheets. It's simply leveraging your skills, talents, and passions and helping you do it better. And you have Drool tech. And Drool tech.
Drool tech?
Drool tech.
Okay.
Drool tech helps you consume. It wants to take your time, your focus, and your money. So if it has levels, if it has followers, if it has likes and subscribers, there's a good chance there's an algorithm trying to drive your attention to return to build a behavioral loop, to build a habit. And that's not bad, but it is important to know, because if you're going to have a fight about technology, if something's going to draw your child or your grandchild away from their purpose and distract them to, infinity, it's probably going to be Drool tech. And so that's the first thing. The second thing I like them to know is that a simple spot to start is with conversation. Simply looking at, hey, what kind of tech do we use? Is it Tool? Is it Drool? And then begin building healthful boundaries in three areas. We need to have the relational ones. So build what I call a hedge around your family. Around the devices themselves, there needs to be some kind of accountability on every device. And then around the network. So if you have wireless internet, like smart TVs need accountability, and hedges around the network help.
So like some kind of filtering software that should be part of that? Or?
If you're listening to this and you're like, hey, my grandkids come over, something like the Bark Home, you can just plug it into that little box that gives you the internet. And the Bark Home allows you to set time limits and tells you where people went on your smart TV, because that thing is a full web browser. Like, you need to know that. So that would be an example of a hardware piece. For software, installing something like Bark, the software, not the device you plug in. It makes both. You go bark.us, it'll make sense. What I like about those Bark products is they are relationally focused. The goal is you can put up all the hardware and software in the world. If you got a kid who wants to make a mistake, they're going to make a mistake. What we want is that 2 Corinthians 5:17 new creation to be celebrated. So we go, all right, you're a new creation in Christ, and we're going to help you remain so. So when temptation comes, someone else is going to see what's happening. And that's what I love about those resources. So on the devices, in the relationships, and on your network is where you need to have support.
What age would you say is maybe an appropriate age to start using, particularly like a smartphone?
Oh, my goodness. Well, they can use a parent's smartphone as early as late elementary, junior high, use a grandparent's like with supervision. I say 15 to own your own smartphone. 15 if they've shown themselves faithful in little things, if they're healthy with their technology, and if they've asked for one. That you do not need to give a kid a smartphone just to make them a good adult. There are lots of actually kids who are going to college and ditching their smartphones because they realize they're more distraction than benefit. But those three things, the reason 15, they've lived long enough to see some issues with their friends. They're old enough to prove their faithfulness in areas like friendships, sleep, schoolwork, emotional maturity. If you can't handle real life relationships, there's no way you can handle Twitter. I know it's not Twitter. I know it's X, but I just can't call it X. So.
Well, another website that we hear so much about these days is TikTok. Should that just be completely avoided? Anything good about TikTok?
TikTok,
that's a whole other subject.
It's another subject, but I think briefly, there are people sharing the gospel well in TikTok spaces. The problem is you can't manage content in TikTok. It's a massive stream, average 30-second videos, average daily use of 90 minutes. Those kids are seeing 180 minutes. What we know is that when kids are on social media, their likelihood of depression and suicidal ideation goes up, starting at 2 hours to 22%, up to 5 hours at 66%. This is a 2017 study from Gene Twenge and San Diego State University. Social media is fraught, but there are people doing good work there. You want to start with, is my kid healthy? The acronym I use when you look at your kids or grandkids is look at, does tech get in the way of their relationships and responsibilities, emotions, their sleep, enjoyment, and time. It's called the reset. And if their tech improves each of those areas, then celebrate that. Go ahead and encourage and be a part of it with them. Go in that space. Say, hey, what are you watching? Who are you talking to? What's that like? If it's not, that then becomes the talking point. Say, hey, I've noticed when you play that game, when you're on your phone, when you do these activities digitally, I've noticed it impedes this particular part of your life. I've noticed you're emotionally unwell. I've noticed you don't enjoy what God's wired you to love. You don't like being around me anymore. And we fight more because of this intervention. And that becomes the talking point, because your young person, your child or grandchild will see you're not just judging them. You're not just coming in on your high horse saying kids these days, they need to be outside more. Right. Like parents and grandparents, let's remember, we had 2 world wars before the invention of the internet. Like, people still had problems. But now what we're doing is we're getting these spaces where we can be so distracted and so spread so thin and so anxious that we're not able to be everything God has called us to be. So TikTok can be good. I'm not on there because I find it as a net loss for me. I do not encourage your young people to be on there. Delay TikTok as long as possible. But no, there are people who are reaching people with hope and truth and Christ on TikTok. But my goodness, it's a pretty tough medium to do that.
Okay, well, the medium is onpurposely.com. We're talking with Nathan Sutherland. He's the host of a great resource called Gospel Tech. He deals with all these subjects and many more. Each, once a week?
Once a week.
Once a week,
Join
a new
us.
show drops, and you can listen to that. Great resource for families. And that, again, that's onpurposely.com. You can find out more details at kcisradio.com. Nathan, thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.